Hello people and welcome back. Today we're going to finish off the chapter Background to the Ritual Battle from the book Ireland, Land of the Pharaohs. And it's quite an interesting book, and I looked into this Battle of the Boyne outside of this book, tried to do a little bit of research, and it is a lot of sketchy stuff. There's a lot of sketchy stuff in that, but the way this author goes into the whole ritual battle could be taking us off the fact that the battle maybe never happened, or maybe it was more of a symbolic thing, the passing over from the royals to the parliamentaries, or like they try and make out it's a whole Catholicism to Protestantism, but I think it was more to do with government being more involved in the nation rather than the royals. But definitely interesting. It's interesting how William was James's son-in-law, so it's like they're on the same team here. And today, this is one of the biggest battles that the Orange Men during their parade celebrate. And if this is true, if this battle never actually happened, it would give a totally different look in the whole Irish conflict right now. Anyway, enough of my rambling. Let's get on with this chapter. Let's finish it. But it's been interesting, I've got to say. It is 2 days' sail from the Cassiderides to the island which the ancients called the Sacred Isle. In the midst of its waters is cast up much surf, and is widely inhabited by the race of the Hiberni. These are the words of Hamilcar, 300 BC, the voyages of the Carthaginian admiral being recorded by Festus Avenius Hamilcar. Even his time is referring back to the view of the ancients. The long-suffering and peace-loving majority in Ireland of all religions and none, in common with most other countries, have accepted a story about our ancestry and history that, frankly, just does not make sense. It does leave all of us open, though, to manipulation and attack by a mysterious elite that wishes to maintain the status quo. These manipulators appear in many guises and are not above using others' work to accomplish their goals. An example of this is the Irish historian Peter Beresford's Ellis speech at the Irish Labour History Museum in 1995 in Dublin, reproduced as a booklet by the Connolly Association in London called Orangeanism, Myth and Reality. A close reading of this booklet will show how history can be used as a vehicle for political ends, and how parcels of truth can be taken out of context for the purpose of manipulation. Beresford Ellis, after a pretentious and gibe attack on one section of Irish society, ends with these words: "For the historian there is a sadness that a people can be so utterly manipulated by a misunderstanding of history. Instead of being shown the reality of a common past, the Protestants of Ulster have been deliberately subverted into believing a mythological history. Their view of William of Orange and the Boyne Water is a dream of a world which never existed. The worst thing is that, lacking the knowledge of the realities of the common past shared with their fellow Irish men and women, they are still disputing the realities of the present. Most people are willing to believe the simple myths of folklore rather than the grey complexities of historical reality. This is the problem we are faced with today." Reflections like these maintain a Hegelian concept of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, or the modern interpretation, problem, reaction, and solution. After all, we have not seen so far that all facets of history are simple mythology. People of the ilk of Beresford Ellis hold positions of influence, being respected in academia as an exceptional Irish historian, which could bring people together by honestly reassessing this prejudiced view of history, instead of using the shilly-lag as a cudgel to attack one side of the community. Our current historical view only leads to conflict by demonising one section of our society that appears to fulfil a hidden agenda. If historians like this would take an honest look at history, they would discover that we have always had a common and inclusive history, as opposed to the Sinn Féin we ourselves mentality that has added to the separation and suffering of a courageous people. This demonstrates the contradiction in contemporary Irish politics, that the enemy of peace and progress in Ireland are misguided socialist and religious nationalists of all shades. However, let us proceed, because this is not meant to be a political document, and the above opposing views are only pointed out for an understanding of the complexities and manipulations that passes as history. Because of the manipulated confusion we've been left with, and which we are supposed to believe, the Battle of the Boyne has been portrayed as an insignificant religious battle that was part of a greater war going on in Europe, or, as Professor Raymond Gillespie puts it, a footnote in European history. Hardly a footnote if the many different nationalities that were at the battle are anything to go by. On William's side there was English, Welsh, Scotch, Irish, French, Huguenots, Dutch, Danish, Germans, Prussians, Swiss mercenaries and Finns. James's side had Irish, French, Flemish, Walloons, Swiss, Italian, Belgium and possibly some West Indians. Most countries in Western Europe went to the trouble to send not only their foot soldiers but their princes and senior officers as well. The list of personalities involved is straight out of the who's who of European royalty. George of Denmark, the Prince of Hesse-Darmstadt, the Duke of Württemberg, William's favourite, the Lord Douglas, Count de Nassau, Baron de Ginkle, Lieutenant General Mackay, Major General Scravemore, Major General Talmarsh and Monsieur de Overkirk. Also, out of England, the Earls of Oxford, Portland and Manchester, as well as Lord Sydney. A footnote in history? Not being an academic historian, fortunately, has left me free to explore the different paths and different possibilities that traditional historians may find barred to them, or which may have been overlooked as being ridiculous or not fitting in with the agenda. As Mike Bailey remarked to me, I can get away with one book like this, Exodus to Arthur, but not two, presumably referring to the peer pressure. It will be shown, when we escape from the loop of political prejudice, a new paradigm opens from which a more mythological story unfolds. The major problem we have with the received story of the ritual battle is that it has been viewed out of context for so long that most people, especially in Ireland, find it difficult to view it in any other way than a religious battle. It is currently in vogue to declare that the Battle of the Boyne was not really part of a religious war, thereby inferring that the people of Ulster are fools, trapped by a foolishly simplified view of the past. While it is equally true that no war has a single cause or origin, religion was undoubtedly one of the main factors in the Williamite Wars. It is this kind of thinking that patronises the Ulster people and keeps us firmly rooted in the past, a specious past at that. It is also a graphic example of the manipulation we visit on each other without the need of a conspiracy. Wallace and Beresford Ellis are two sides of the one coin, each trying to discredit or prove some religious or political point of the documented story of the ritual battle, yet neither of them can see the whole picture, and by not seeing they can only add to the pain and confusion. This mindset keeps us in conflict because it unfolds a deeper and considerably more profound history. This is possibly the first time that the accepted accounts for and against have been taken outside politics and religion to be looked at and challenged. Parallel in this, it has been demonstrated that the prehistorical source of the Scots-Irish people is much more ancient and mysterious than anyone has so far suspected. From the moment we begin to look at our history from a different perspective, the many flaws in the traditional stories become clear. This is especially true of the remarkable events at the Boyne River. No one has been able to explain it in terms that would give all the people of Ireland cause to be interested in this amazing mythological event. Let's remind ourselves we are not just talking about Ireland, but the whole of Western civilization. Conspiracy. Throughout the story of the battle there has been repeated suggestions of a conspiracy. Certainly there was a general confusion within the ranks of the officer class because of the puzzling orders coming from both kings. The offer of a light to the blind, concurring with Gilbert, we will assume the author of this anonymous document was Nicholas Plunkett, make no secret of his opinion that there were people within James's camp who were intent upon the destruction of the nation. Plunkett highlights the confusion that marked the Williamite Wars all through his narrative, but is only here and there he alludes to an actual conspiracy, and this could be put down to incompetence or the general confusion of war. To support a conspiracy, credible sources had to be cited that agree with our basic proposition, even if they did not agree with the why of the agenda. The respected historian Macaulay said that James, when given instructions to the French general St. Ruth, butcher of the Huguenots, before he set sail for Ireland, informed him that Tyrconnell had secret instructions not to intermeddle in the war. We will eventually come to an understanding why this was so. A first-hand account of the evidence for a conspiracy that we will now examine comes from an obscure little booklet that came into my possession and which was written by a colonel in King James's army named Charles O'Kelly. An educated man, O'Kelly's formative years were spent in Belgium, where he studied rhetoric in the forgotten Irish College of St. Omer under the famous professor of eloquence, Varnelius. O'Kelly's manuscript, see footnote, confirmed by the Tyrconnellite sick account, A Light to the Blind, originally consisted of 33 pages of foolscap, closely written in a clear and beautiful hand, makes no bones about identifying the seeming confusion as a cover for conspiracy. In the preface to O'Kelly's book, the editors, Count Plunkett and Reverend E.D.M. Hogan, write, in support of O'Kelly's strictures on James and his counsellors and allies, we may add, as in this narrative, so in other documents of the time, James appears variable and irresolute, intent of trifles, and in his policy, when he has a policy, more anxious to satisfy his enemies than his friends. They summarise by describing how James fled Ireland, Tyrconnell followed, de Lauzun and his troops were recalled while James was in France. These and many other circumstances seem to confirm this supposition of the old Irish that the king and his advisers meant to surrender Ireland to William. The conspiracy, according to O'Kelly, was piloted by James, Tyrconnell and the French general de Lauzun. O'Kelly alleges James was working on the premise that, like his brother Charles II, he too would be recalled to the throne of England, if only he could be done with Ireland. King James, however, was so intent upon following the advice of his favourites not to act anything in favour of the Irish, or for the re-establishment of the Catholic worship that might dissatisfy his Protestant subjects in England, who, as they, the favourites, believed, would undoubtedly recall him if he continued his wonted moderation, that pursuant to his maxim he would not admit the Catholic bishops to take their places in the Assembly of the States, though he allowed it to 4 Protestant bishops, so that whoever considers this different behaviour of the Prince James in the Temple and Senate would take him for a serious Catholic in the one and a true Protestant in the other. A footnote on the same page stretches O'Kelly's position on the theory a little further. James, writing in 1691 about the movement in England for his restoration, says that the proposals of his friends permitted him to live a Catholic in devotion, but to reign a Protestant in government. This reinforces the earlier proposal that William and James were first and foremost adherents of the mystery schools and that their assumed religiosity was secondary. O'Kelly scrutinises the Irish Williamite War in detail and concludes it was conspiratorial from the beginning. He also examines each conspirator in turn and gives his opinion on why he believed they wanted to hand Ireland to William. James, he reasoned, as we have seen, wanted to be rid of Ireland in the hope that his English subjects would restore his throne as they had done with his brother. Tyrconnell was an apparatchik to James, who in turn favoured him with titles. He made him a peer of Ireland and Lieutenant General of the Army, and he also acquired considerable estate in Ireland. When James came to Ireland, he made him Captain General of the Irish, advanced him to the highest dignities that a subject would be capable of, and gave him a vast estate fit for a prince. Tyrconnell was naturally going to do his benefactor's bidding, since he also stood for the Anglo-Irish Catholic Party, which had little sympathy with the native race and Gaelic tradition. Lastly, he proposes de Lauzun's motive for wanting to hand Ireland to William was simple homesickness, and records that the French general longed so much to be back in his own country that he could not endure to hear of prolonged war in Ireland, and it is probable that some of his captains, who longed to breathe the sweet air of France, despaired of the country, believed it impossible to preserve it. Tyrconnell nourished this humour because it favoured his design not to oppose William in his conquest of Ireland. This ends our brief summary of O'Kelly's version of the conspiracy. We must bear in mind he knew nothing of the occult overtones of the War of the Ritual at the Boyne. It's only lack of space and time that prevents us delving deeper into O'Kelly's story. The above account is an adequate preview of the fuller version. Just one more observation before leaving O'Kelly. He differentiates between the old Irish who wanted to fight and the immigrant Anglo-Irish who wanted to capitulate to William. Curtis remarked, the Boyne marked the doom of the old English loyalist aristocracy. We have seen, even from a cursory look at the facts, that the accepted history of this momentous battle is on shaky ground. But it gets even shakier. There will shortly be offered evidence which will leave us in no doubt that, at the very least, establishment historians have missed, ignored, or repressed something of profound import. Alexander Sloushin's axiom gives us a clue as to why this should be, and he should know, to destroy a people you must first sever their roots. It is understood that the repression of honest history does not apply only to Ireland, but is in fact universal. It is the same story of dichotomy and conflict repeated, presented, only the setting and the telling changes. However, what began in the undulating landscape of Boyne in 1690 has affected most countries, directly or indirectly, in the world. It is obvious from the moment James set foot in Ireland, and in all his preparations to meet William, his actions and decisions were confusing and disturbing to the people closest to him. In fact, before he fled England for France, he had already given birth, as we have seen previously, to the nursery rhyme, the Grand Old Duke of York. William had let him escape twice before he finally made it to France. The offer of a light to the blind repeatedly questions James' motives and preparations at the Boyne. For example, he sounds confused when he's trying to explain James's seeming inability to decide if he's going to fight or retreat, finally deciding and, incidentally, concurring with O'Kelly that there was a conspiracy. Here we will consider thus: either the king resolved at his encampment on the banks of the Boyne to fight the Prince of Orange in order to keep him beyond the river, the old Rubicon of the Pale and the frontier of the corn country, or he resolved not. If he resolved not, why did he not decamp early on Monday morning, before the Prince of Orange appeared on the other side of the river, or on the Monday night? Because it is not safe to rise in the face of a more potent enemy. If the king resolved to stand his ground, why did he not use the common rules of art military for the strengthening of an inferior army against a superior? But unfortunately none of these courses were taken, which makes me fear that some one or more of the king's counsellors were underhand intent upon the destruction of the nation. Not being privy to the true intent of the main players, confusion is necessarily piled upon confusion as the same author struggles to make sense of what is happening around him. The king, observing the prince's attempts at trajection, commanded his army to halt and face the enemy, which they did, and prepared themselves to fight upon the passage of the river. But alas, they were deceived in their expectations, for there was no battle, because they were not brought to combat. There was only a skirmish in passing the waters between a party of theirs and the whole army of Orange, and because this party did not keep all the hostile troops beyond the flood, the Boyne, the king's host must march away and leave the pass to the foe. If there was a settled resolution to fight, why was not the army led into two wings to the river, their field pieces as they saw the enemy's forces divided, and there to stand it out for 2 or 3 hours? William's own preparations for the battle did not shed any more light on the confusion which continues unabated. He was at loggerheads with his officers. Schomberg, for example, wanted to begin the attack on the Monday night, with William refusing. However, this whole event will begin to make sense when it is viewed exclusively as a ritual battle. There was, for instance, a very good reason why he refused to fight on the Monday. Try to figure out yourself the difference between Monday and Tuesday from an esoteric point of view. This will help put us on the same wavelength and prepare us for what is to come. On the Tuesday morning at 8 o'clock, as William, now stationed on the banks of the Boyne, gets ready for his crossing, James at the same time prepares to flee. In order, as 'twas believed, to go to Dublin to get better opportunity of defence or of giving battle, this being so, the army began their march. The Prince of Orange, seeing them in their motion of going off, ordered his army, and not before, to pass the river in two places, principally at the ford of Oldbridge and at the ford of Rosneree. It seems obvious we are being told that William did not advance until he saw James beginning to withdraw. This being the case, we can only assume that the battle was over before it started, or the outcome was known in advance. Contradictions persist, report after historical report pointing to something more subtle happening than is apparent on the surface. We have now seen the preparations take place of what has always been portrayed as a battle between two kings for control of 3 kingdoms of Ireland, Scotland and England. However, when presented as a battle, we are having trouble making any sense of the actions of either king, unless O'Kelly maintains there was a hidden agenda. The apparent warm family relationship they had with each other given their opposing viewpoints, is another contradiction. From a litany of incongruities, my thesis has been aired to show that they both came from different branches of the same ancestral tree, and that any antagonism between them was wholly superficial. They never once threatened actual violence towards each other, or indeed harm of any sort. The truth is in quite fact the contrary, but this is only understandable in the context of ritual and ancient family blood ties. In this, we discovered a purpose for the ritual battle, which was to transfer power from one branch of the family to the other, from Stuart to Orange. This ushered a new paradigm for civilization, that is, a new world order, to oppose the Vatican-controlled old world order. In Volume 2 of the History of His Own Time, Bishop Burnet makes clear the strong bonds between James, his daughter, and his son-in-law. He recounts a discussion he had with William the day before the prince set out to Ireland, when William confided in him and his concerns for James. He said the going to a campaign was naturally no unpleasant thing to him. He was sure he understood that better than how to govern England. He added that though he had no doubt nor mistrust of the cause he went on, yet the going against King James in person was hard upon him, since it would be a vast trouble both to himself and to the Queen, if he should be either killed or taken prisoner. He continues, I had a particular occasion to know how tender he was of a King James's person, having learnt an instance of it from the first hand. A proposition was made to the King that a third-rate ship, well manned by a faithful crew and commanded by one who had been well with King James, but was such a one as the King might trust, should sail to Dublin and declare for King James. The person who told me this offered to be the man that should carry the message to King James, for he is well known to him, to invite him to come on board, which he seemed to be sure he would accept of, and when he was aboard, they should sail away with him, and land him either in Spain or Italy, as the King should desire, and should have £20,000 to give him when he should be set ashore. William feared James's guards would come to his aid, and in the struggle some accident might happen to King James's person, in which he would have no hand. Burnet goes on to divulge how William thought that the plan was a good idea and would probably succeed, but he makes the excuse of treachery and James's safety as the reasons for not carrying it out. However, William knew something Burnet did not, which was James had to be delivered safely to Boyne for the ritual and for the subsequent transfer of the keys of the Kingdom of Britain to take place. To confirm this proposition O'Boyle suggested earlier about James seemingly having a different agenda than his generals, Burnet tells about a council of war James held, to consider what was fit to be done, whether he should make a stand there and to put all to the decision of a battle, or if he should march off and abandon that river, and by consequence all the country on to Dublin. All his officers, both French and Irish, who disagreed almost in all their advices, yet agreed in this, that though there had been a very advantageous post to maintain, yet the army being so much inferior, both in number and in everything else, they would put too much to hazard if they should venture on a battle. They therefore proposed the strengthening of their garrisons and marching off to the Shannon with the horse and a small body of foot, till they should see how matters went at sea. In opposition to all their opinions, King James himself was positive that they must stay and defend the Boyne. He spoke of this with much seeming pleasure, that many about him apprehended that he was weary of the struggle. Excuse me. Another puzzling incident, according to Burnet, takes place between James, William and Mary. It seems that a cabal on James's side hired an assassin to kill William before he left for Ireland, but, as usual, when any of the main players were in danger, the plans go awry. The assassin, an Irishman called Jones, was delayed in Ireland, which prevented him from getting to England before William left for Ireland. Being a shrewd Irishman, he kept the money and sailed off into the sunset, never to be heard of again. This incident was to be published to shame James, but William and Mary tellingly stepped in to save the day. Burnet again, a paper was drawn of all this matter and designed to be published, but upon second thoughts, the King and Queen had the tenderness for King James, as they stopped the publishing to the world so shameful a practice. The King said upon this to myself that God had preserved him out of many dangers, and he trusted he would still preserve him. he was sure he was not capable of retaliating in that way. James, not to be outdone, returns the compliment by saving William's life at the Boyne from a sniper who had William in his sights, and later saves William's fleet at Kinsale. King James, when he sailed away from Duncannon, was forced by contrary winds to go into the road of Kinsale, where he found some French frigates, that they were already come to burn our fleet. He told them it was now too late, all was lost in Ireland, so he carried them back to convoy him over to France. Long before he arrived in England, William had offered James his troops to help put down the rebellion by the favourite bastard son, Monmouth Charles II, after Louis XIV refused to help James. Before leaving Dublin for France, James ordered the garrison to submit to the Prince of Orange, who was a merciful man and too much blood had already been lost. He set the prisoners free and ordered that the Protestants of the city were not to be abused in any way. This allowed William to secure Dublin without opposition. William in turn issued a proclamation of grace, offering to all the inferior sort of the native Irish their lives and personal estates. The king had intended to have made the pardon more comprehensive, hoping by that to bring the war soon to an end. But the English in Ireland opposed this. They thought the present opportunity was not to be let go, of breaking the great Irish families upon whom the inferior sort would always depend. James leaves Ireland never to return, even though according to a light to the blind he had no reason to leave. Wherefore we must conclude that the king had no solid reason to quit Ireland upon the loss sustained at the Boyne in his troops, for the army was rather somewhat stronger at the end of that petty conflict than before. William, as we have seen, was also anxious to leave Ireland, and did so before the so-called Williamite wars were completed. He relinquished centre stage to the trusted general Baron de Ginkle, who was managed the rest of the war. James wanted to end what was the de facto war as much as William, but the Irish, under Sarsfield, stumbled along for another year until the settlement of the Treaty of Limerick. This treaty allowed the Irish army to go unharmed to France, where they served in the service of Louis against the League of Augsburg. They were later known as the Irish Wild Geese, mercenaries who fought all over Europe. Another puzzle, because the Williamite generals must have known that they would have to face these same troops again. They were, in fact, given troops to the enemy. None of this is surprising in view of what had gone before, as the author of A Light to the Blind summarises. Here the Prince of Orange may say, as Julius Caesar did in his expedition of Zela, Veni, Vidi, Vici, so many towns hath the prince taken without resistance, which if each of them had been given Orange had been undone, for the war of Ireland would have been prolonged, and consequently the confederacy abroad, Grand Alliance, would have been forced within 2 years at the furthest to make a peace with France, for want of the assistance of England, which was all employed against the Irish, by which peace all the power of France would fall upon poor England, to her chastisement for her frequent rebellion, and to the dethroning of that unnatural usurper. Conclusion. This chapter had the purpose of preparing the ground to approach the events surrounding and including the Battle of the Boyne from a radically different viewpoint. We have reviewed, received wisdom about the battle, and discovered that there are too many inconsistencies for any firm conclusion to be reached as to what really happened during the events at Brú na Boyne. Because of this, a massive conspiracy has been visited on the British people, namely a sectarian battle being fought with a winner and a loser that ultimately gave rise to the difficulties that beset Western society today. An attempt was made to expose the established historical narrative and demonstrate how we have all been misled about the events at the Boyne River and the perception that it was only a battle. It has been proposed that an understanding of the battle from an esoteric viewpoint will open a portal to a new narrative of world history. The participants await us, and the portal has been opened. We will now be invited to enter and witness this ancient ritual, being prepared for our enjoyment and judgment. You will be left in no doubt that what will be experienced will be an Egyptian Osiris ritual, with the proviso that recalls an older civilization than the Egyptians. There will be those who will perhaps see more than can be set out in the words, because this ritual can be understood on many levels. They, with the greatest breadth of imagination, will peel back the most layers. It is easy to believe that something must be true because everyone else believes it, but the truth often only comes to light by daring to question the unquestionable, by doubting notions which are so commonly believed that they are taken for granted. Let us now proceed to claim our place to watch as two kingly initiates engage in this remarkable ancient ceremony. He answered and said unto him, Because it is given unto you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it is not given. Matthew 13:11. So that concludes that chapter, people. Which, I've got to say, the second part was a lot better than the first part. It kind of wrapped it all up, and there is a lot of good points made, and I wouldn't be surprised if this battle never really happened, to be honest with you. The author obviously ties in the ritual, the Egyptian stuff, which you could probably just leave out. If you could get over to the Irish people that this battle was more of a ritual, a ceremony, and the two kings were actually buddies and quite close. If you could get that over to the Irish people, that this battle has been taken well out of context, and now we've got this today between Protestants and Catholics. If you can just get that out with all this Egyptian stuff, it would be so groundbreaking, really, if it is true. Anyway, people, I hope you enjoyed that conclusion, and I will see you in the next chapter. Just a couple to go now, people. See you later and have a great weekend. Cheers.